Welcome to SHEnanigans, where we tell the stories behind the success and the shenanigans they took to get there. Today, my guest is Mieko Ozeki, who is the founder of Radiant Studios and co-founder of Vermont Womenpreneurs. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I think we're going to have a really lively conversation because you have so many roles and hats that you wear that you defy labels. So I'm really curious to hear all about that. So, let's start with that a little bit first. Like, how did you get here? You kind of came from New York City and Outward Bound, and like here you are with your own marketing studio and Vermont Womenpreneurs. What was that journey like?
Wow. Well, thank you for having me here. Yeah, I would say everything's kind of like a journey of like accidents and coincidences. So my arrival from New York City, between that has been like Colorado, living out there in a world of, I did like experiential education, to getting into environmental education and environmental work that landed me here via Boston to here in Vermont to the University of Vermont. So for 8 years, I worked as the Sustainability Projects Coordinator for the University of Vermont's Office of Sustainability. So my job was to basically ensure that we met our commitments of like our climate commitments through the university. And I ran a huge fund that was student fee based for climate, particularly clean energy. So that got me there, and then after a while, there's a point where you start to realize, I was talking to a few colleagues this past weekend about, there's a point in the nonprofit world where you realize that there is no up, there's only lateral, and maybe there isn't really lateral, so you kind of have to do something else. And so I was newly pregnant, I had my daughter, and I was like, I need change. And my boss was actually encouraged me, actually it was my boss who encouraged me partly through my work at UVM to start my own business, because I was on the side coaching a lot of students how to build their own personal brand and portfolio. That's kind of like the essence of where Radiant Studios started. So kind of like, how do you actually have a solid portfolio of your body of work and then promote it through a website, social media, all of that. And she's like, we don't pay you for that, so you should probably go and like figure out how to like start a business. And actually that got me in my journey of understanding like sort of what the entrepreneurial world here in Vermont was like, how do I start an LLC? Who do I reach? How do I start a business plan? So I started doing that, and my next job was working for Yes Tomorrow Design Build School, and I was the program and program director as well as marketing director. So that's 2 full-time jobs. And after about 17 months, it was a bit stressful, and I was just like, I'm done. Actually, I told that to, I was very elated to say that to my boss because he was not a great boss, and so. Getting to say that was relieving. And then, interesting enough, I had also gotten into a retreat called the Better Selves Fellowship out of Knoll Farm, which was up the road from Yes Tomorrow. And I actually just came back from a 10-year reunion of folks who have been part of that fellowship. And what was wonderful about it was that like it was 6 days basically they just took care of you. Like they fed you, they provided these beautiful retreat space, and then nothing really else other than you have camaraderie with other social justice and environmental justice leaders who from all over the country.
How big a group was it? It
was about 30 of us, I think, and like these are people who were coming from all over the country who were working on these things, and this was meant to be like a pure respite so that we can recharge ourselves for whatever we were doing. And I had just come from, I'm like done with like all of this. I've been burned out from doing a lot of work in the environmental world for over 20 years, and so like this was like the first time I like did a deep assessment of like, what am I good at? So for 6 days, I was like 1 year into being a mom and was without my kid. I was like all being taken care of and around this community of people. There were people working on their books, and there were other people working on other projects. We all made chopsticks, which was a cool, fun thing. Like that was very meditative, and also spoons. But anyhow, it was a really interesting retreat in the sense that like I just sat in front of my computer. I have this picture of me sitting in front of my computer looking at my personal website and being like, okay, like what am I good at? And so assessing the past careers, what I was really good at, which was like, I'm really good at convening people. I really like collaborating with other folks and connecting them to one another. And the last part is like, I love being somebody's cheerleader. And as you say, like having 3 C's is a really good thing to remember those values. But for me, what was wonderful about that was I just like sat with it. So like rather than having an answer, like what am I gonna do next? I was like, I'll hold on to this. I don't know what this is gonna mean. Maybe something will find me. And like 3 months later, I walked into, some bunch of events happened. Like I took part in a group called Ladies Get Paid, and they were holding town hall meetings where they were convening women to be able to like talk very bluntly about the wage gap and what's going on with their careers, and I was really enthralled with that. The other thing that was happening was that I went to a workshop for the Center for Women in Enterprise on being a solopreneur, because I was like, well, I have this LLC, I should do something about it. And it was because of the instructor, Lisa Wood. She said something like, why don't you guys like, you know, being a solopreneur is really hard. Like you're in your head, you're always judging yourself, like, and the only person you can fire is really yourself. So like how can you hold space for one another? And she goes like, why don't you guys get together? And I was like, first
That's a
C,
great
like let me
idea.
convene people. And so actually after that, I reached out to everyone in that group, and I was like, hey, if I were like, I organize something, we meet up somewhere like at a library, would you, let's just meet up. And that was cool, because the first time we did was January of 2018. We were at the Fletcher Free Library. We had 15 women show up, and we were all kind of like sitting there and just kind of like just figuring it out. But what do we want to share without having it be icky, like typical networking? It's also the same timing, like when partway through a Ladies Get Paid event, I met my co-founder, because Bethany Andrews-Nichols. I met her at a Ladies Get Paid event the day after she was let go from Magic Hat. And a mutual friend of ours was like, have you met? And we were like, no. And we really just hit it off. And I was like in between like a gap time of figuring out what I wanted to do. And she was just early in her stage and figuring out whether she wants a business. So kind of like I like to say for both of us, it's kismet of meeting the person that like
the right
fits
time,
in the right
place and
time.
fit. Yeah, and that is so hard to do, because entrepreneurship it's fraught with all kinds of decisions and stressors and challenges to find somebody that you vibe with, that you align with values-wise and work ethic-wise and just vision-wise. It's rare, so that's really cool. So that was the start of Vermont Womenpreneurs.
Yeah. And like for us, I think one of the things, as you said, like it's that matching of like different talents. Like one of the things I think going into is realizing like, what are you not strong at? And for me, I'm like, I have a art degree, like I have an art design degree, but in 3D art. So I'm not like a graphic designer, but I have a concept of like shapes and colors, but I'm not great. Yeah, I have that. I've also done editorial work, so like that's wonderful. But what's great about working with somebody like Bethany is that like, I can give her a concept and she can give me 3 ideas, and then we can gel and work on it and narrow down. And that's over the years, like we're always inventing new swag items, and like we could just bounce off each other, and it's so friendly versus like, I've definitely worked with a lot of consultants, and sometimes it's like they don't necessarily get it. So it's wonderful to have both a friend and a person who's super talented be able to express themselves through their work and being able to like match up with it. But to me too, like when we started Vermont Womenpreneurs, like she was just at the beginning of starting her business, and she was like, I don't have friends. And I was like, well, my middle name means friend, so it's like, well, I'm here to like, I guess, make you more friends. And so I feel like, our running joke, she goes, you gotta stop saying this, but it's like, my running joke was like, we built Vermont Womenpreneurs so she can have more friends. And more people have a lot of friends as a result of meeting people in our meetups.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back a little bit to the retreat and the respite that you talked about. That's so important.
Yeah.
And I think for women especially, because we're always, got so many things going on. There's like 17 conversations on in our head, even when we're having just one, right? And so how would you, like, obviously that's not something that every woman can do, every business owner can do, is like take themselves away, shut off completely, which is another thing I'd love to ask you, like how did you get your brain to shut off from all the things that you had to do? But what would you advise for somebody who can't, like, physically go away for 10 days and do that? How do you do that deep work to figure out what you're good at, what you're not good at, and really get to that place?
Yeah. I think sometimes it feels like to go on retreat, you have to force yourself into a time. There's like, but it also has to meet with the fact that you want to do it. So some people may put it on their plan, like, I'm gonna do a retreat, or I'm gonna take this time, and then it's like the time comes and you're like, like I have to think about it, and so it's a little bit too overwhelming. So sometimes you have to meet both moments, like, is this my energy where I'm at and I wanna like think about this and have a conversation. Sometimes also, for me though, it's like the retreat actually happens in like connecting with other people. And in that moment, I do a lot more digging about like, oh, this is what I recognize, a pattern that I'm good at. Or part of a retreat also is like, one, identifying the things that you need. And then the second is sharing it with other people and having that accountability. In particular, I really appreciate when you can share, like, this is what I'm good at or what I want to do, and ask people, like, what do you see? Like, reflect that back to me, because we don't ask that often because we're scared.
I was just going to say, like, that collective energy, but also being around people who are going to ask you hard questions, deep questions, sometimes uncomfortable questions, and questions that you're never going to ask yourself. And then you can see that what other people are talking about, reflect that back and take it to yourself. So it's that collective convening energy at work. Yeah.
I mean, I think sometimes our friends who really know you and others who don't. Like, so there's a really interesting part of, like, when I've been started with personal branding work, I started with, like, my methodology has write out all the different things to describe what you're good at, based on hard fact experience, like what can you pull out, and what are other things that you've observed, not just like your resume kind of like over as a whole, but like what did you do with that? What was the experience? Like what did you get out of it? And what I usually would tell somebody, because sometimes I would have people call me like, I don't know what I want to do with myself. And I'm like, okay, sit down, write down, like without too much thought, all these words that describe yourself. Then the next part is reach out to a handful of friends and say, this is where I'm starting from, what I understand of myself. Can you add to my vocabulary of what you see about me? And then also, can you give me the evidence? Because sometimes I don't see the evidence of that experience. And so that has always been kind of a thing that I've built over time from all of my past work, like from the outdoor industry, when you're working with, I've worked with high school dropouts, and I've worked out with a lot of other folks who had difficult times in their lives. And so doing that reflective exercise is not the surface level. It's like,
it's deep.
Name the word, like it starts with a word, but behind that word, what is the kind of the evidence that things that like
it's like the iceberg graphic, right?
Yeah.
What you see on top. So I'm curious in that realm then, what are your views on AI? Because a lot of people are going to ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini to try and figure out, like, what am I good at? How can I start a business? What can I do? Have you run into that, like where the pitfalls are? Because a lot of people are really trusting the machines until what to do next.
So here's like so I have a bachelor's in philosophy. So I look at it very very meta in the sense of I'm not going to utilize AI as my crutch, but that I treat it like an intern, right? It's not so much my collaborator, it's something like, here's what my writing is, what are you, like, I want you to ask me the questions, right? Maybe I'm missing a question, and then it gets me stirred up. And so too often we use a lot of our technologies, like how we terribly use even search, right? Which is put a term in and like just blunt force, we just want the actual term and what it stands for, versus like, I don't know, I'm an ex-Ennial, so you know, like I card catalog, like don't look for just the key words. What are all the different things that would lead up to that one word? The same thing I think with AI is just, it's not a person, so knowing that, but it is a tool that recognizes patterns in language and everything else, and sometimes we don't recognize the patterns in our own language, and so if you put in there, ask me a question, I tried using it more for the kind of a Socratic like methodology of like, ask me questions and it gets me stirred up to think about that a little bit more. But yeah, I think there's a little bit of laziness to some folks who just want to just blunt force, like they want an answer.
Yeah.
But then it reminds me of like all humanities classes when I was in college. People are just like, I can't deal with this metaphysical, I don't understand.
Yes.
Just tell me the answer. Or math the same way.
Tell me what to do.
Right, like don't tell me the theory and how I should understand the concept. Just tell me how the answer. And you're like, well, then you miss the whole journey of it all. And I think that's gotten me, you know, when kind of all these chatbots kind of came about, there was a point where I tried Claude and I tried ChatGPT and also DeepSeek, and it was the funniest like interview, like just the exact same prompts, and I was like, it was like interviewing them and being like, let me hear, and like what, and I actually more like copied their thought process of how they got to that answer, and it was just like, I know I'm wasting a lot of water because of this, but it's also like a very fascinating thing. But so it's the same thing like when I had 12 interns working for me when I was at UVM. I never asked them, I always like didn't ask, I asked them more than just like, what classes are you taking? Tell me more about what was the assignment that was challenging? What did you do in it? What was your role? Why is that, like, why do you always step into that role? That's more exciting to me than, like, the process is more exciting than the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're looking at business and the state and all these things from another perspective as well, right? Like you're on the political advocacy side as well. Tell me a little bit about that piece.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things in the process of building this platform is that actually we've started to build a voice more for small businesses. I feel like in general,
Small businesses in general or small women-run businesses?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. So when we started, I would say for Vermont womenpreneurs, I always felt like there were only 5 women in our state, and I know all of them, 5 women in the state who are like, I think the patriarchy determined like, you're successful by these certain metrics, the ones that people deem as like, you're an entrepreneur and you're successful. And they would always have to tell the same story, the same way, the way everybody else wanted to hear it. And that kind of like, I don't know, the New Yorker in me who's grown up with a lot of people who love that kind of like the peripheral kind of things, it just wasn't what I'm interested. But I think when we started it, it was like, your story matters. That's why in every meetup, everyone gets to introduce themselves, talk about what their business is, what's going on for them. And honestly, if they want it, if it feels like there's something ugly, that's great. You're in the right room to share it and you won't be judged for it. Or you have a win and anything's a win, especially when you're in a small business, then you should be able to share that and feel freely and being honest about that. And so by building that platform in the early days of like social media, it was wonderful. You can share all those stories and essentially people were starting to listen. And now like once in a while we would have the news media being like, who else do you know that we can like feature? Which is great because it expands more than just the 5 women that I knew in the beginning 9 years ago who were the central casting for those stories. But I also love it because when I've had them featured in some of our showcases and I'm like, can you just like tell us a real raw story because that's okay.
Yes, yeah. I love this whole real rawness about it and the anti-judgment piece. And I'm curious, you know, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs too, a lot of women, and you know, one of my clients is really struggling starting a business as an older person. You know, a woman who's like, you know, she's the norm is to go into retirement. She's like, no, I'm not done. I want to start a business, but running into, you know, ageism or feeling like she's having these additional challenges running a business. How are you helping, or have you had those conversations with women who are like you know, I'm done with corporate. I'm done with the norm. I'm done with expectations. I'm not done with life and doing what I was put here to do.
Yeah.
And I still have so much more to contribute.
Yeah. I mean, there's a certain point of perfection is the thing that gets in, is the enemy. It's the thing that gets in our way. So that's the first barrier within oneself, like to get over it. But the other part is, you know, sometimes you have to ignore the voices. And I think one other layer I tell people is you're just iterating, right? So I think about like the whole design thinking process, right? You're just like spitting out idea, piloting it, trying it. Like what could go, like if it goes wrong, are you learning from it? Like that's the core thing.
Right.
Or if you're successful at it, how do you build upon it? So I think of like, we've lost, especially as we become adults, we lost the ability to play. And you know, being a business owner is another career identity. And it's an opportunity to play with like, oh, these are the things I'm good at. Do I love this thing? Doing it as my business, etc. And I think sometimes people get like, I need to have this degree. Like back in the 90s, I was like, I need to have an MBA. But I'm like, after meeting Harvard MBAs, like in my time, I'm like, really? There really isn't.
Yes.
Like those guys could do a certain thing, but they couldn't do the multitude of things I see small businesses do and are pushed to do, even though it may not be in their skill set.
Yeah, I really love the emphasis on play. And for me as a business owner, you know, in life, if it's not fun, I won't do it. That's just like part of my personality. So my business has to have fun elements in it. And I think we have all these conditionings that business has to, if you're a business owner, you have to be serious, you have to be formal, and you have to be professional, whatever that means, right? You have to look a certain way, talk a certain way, act a certain way. And I love this idea of being playful in your business, and that goes into the branding as well, right? Like having a personality for a brand, not having everything looking like cookie cutter and not standing out. So I love that piece.
I mean, one of the saving grace, so one of the things early on in Vermont Womenpreneurs, and particularly like during that retreat, one of the things, the imagery that came to my head was throwing a plate of spaghetti against the wall, because like, so the reference goes back to a movie called The Odd Couple. It's actually a Neil Simon play, but basically there's a moment where Charlie, where Unger, right? No, which one is the messy one? Not the neat one. The neat one is like, he's so confined and like, he's so rigid. And it's the moment when he threw the plate of spaghetti that's like, oh, breaking that barrier. And I always think of that plate of spaghetti as it slides down the wall. And like, every idea is like, if the idea sticks, cool. And then also it's not gonna stick forever, for how long? And so it's just, that always runs in my head, especially as I run through different ideas or I try out different things. Every event I've done, it was just like, let's just throw it out there, or maybe something lines up where, like thinking back to like our first showcase, like months into starting Vermont Womenpreneurs, which again, I didn't think it was a thing. I was just meeting people, right? Like that was the cool innocence of it, meeting up with people who are also other business owners. And I asked folks in the room, like, what else could we do? And it was actually Bethany was like, you know, I kind of wish we had something like a science fair for our businesses. And that's what we came up with in terms of our first showcase, was like every business is like a science fair. We all have, our businesses are that volcano that we're throwing baking soda and vinegar at and like seeing whether it works. And so like, how can we have a moment where we can share our stories, our journeys, where we're at, and not get interrupted? And that like was the first thing. And I happened to be working at a study hall, which was a co-working space at the time. And the folks there, they're like, we would love to have like some people come and do story time in our place. And I was like, cool, I have this idea. Like, so like it kind of running with it. And that is kind of how it snowballed. People are like, oh, this is like magical, and this is things like, and other people were sharing other people's stories.
That's a great segue into what's happening next, because you've done so many events as womenpreneurs, and you have really sort of, they've evolved, you've changed them, you've tried things, and it's a lot. So, and I heard like this last one was your last one of that kind. So tell us what's next. What's happening with the organization?
So last June was our last big summit, because it was our 11th production. We've done the whole thing, but we did it in the way that we love to. It was kind of like Bridgerton style. Everybody got to go and have conversations, and it was fun. And so that's kind of like that bigness is on pause for going back to small, but it's also reading the tea leaves of like how people are, it's small, a lot of small businesses are closing and they're just is tight on budget. So reverting back to kind of more focused on smaller meetups, trying to get out.
Buzzes or?
Yeah, more biz buzzes, because that's just like, that's a simpler thing. Everybody needs a steady place where they can meet with other people. So we have not only ours in virtually and on Zoom, we also have it here in Burlington at Deep City on the second Wednesdays of each month at 9:45 a.m. And then we have our other monthly meetups carried out by my collaborator Luella Stratner and the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance in Windham County. So they do some monthly over there and facilitate. And then we have one that's going to be starting up in Newport, which I'm really excited about. So, you know, people have seen the model, and so if they're able to facilitate it, I come up to help either kick it off or give a little bit of a framing for facilitation, and then they could carry it on for themselves. We've partnered with a lot of folks in the past. The one cool thing is, so we are intentionally for-profit because we want to have fun and we want to be able to have the freedom to be able to to focus on the events and not so much on fundraising. We do get sponsorships from time to time. So there's that. The other thing that we're doing after us going to the Women Work Wages Conference by the Vermont Women's Fund and Vermont Works for Women and the Vermont Commission for Women. We saw this film called No Country for Mothers by Moms First, which is led by Reshma Sanjani. And they are doing the screenings of this documentary about kind of the culture wars between tradwife and girl boss, but really what it is what are we missing structurally, which is paid family leave and also child care. So trying to do screenings of that documentary throughout the fall. We have a few of the events lined up, and just so that other people can have those conversations and hopefully having impact on our legislature, because family leave is going to come up again in this next session.
Absolutely. So in the time we have left, tell our viewers what this film is about, why people should see it, and who should see it.
Sure. It's not just for moms, it's actually for parents in general, I think, or if you're not a parent, but somebody who is looking at the whole system of, the kind of underpinning is the culture wars are a distraction to what we are not systemically getting from our government, from our communities, and that what we need is being able to provide the options for parents to be parents or not, and be and have those support systems in place. More or less, that's kind of the underpinning of the whole documentary. But it does go through kind of everything from kind of interviewing mothers in all different forms of everything from the tradwife who in that trend to the girl boss and all the stats in between.
I love that. Thank you so very much for coming. Well, you're going to, I hope, give me a list of where some of these screenings are going to be so we can include them with the show notes for this thing, for this episode. This thing. That'll be great. And how long is the film?
It's 75 minutes, and we have a couple of events. We're still kind of like nailing down some different locations, but we do have one that's happening in Waterbury and in Richmond and in Vergennes. We're trying to get one here in Burlington to show again.
Okay, so maybe somebody can show up or call in and say we can host a screening for you, so that'd be great. And then what's next for you?
Well, I love working on some other projects in regards to supporting small businesses, and so continuing with the advocacy of reminding people that we are here. There's in Vermont, 92% of the businesses are have less than 14 employees, and majority of them are solopreneurs. So that's a big deal when technically small businesses are 500 employees or less. So Vermont's a very unique case, and I wanted to continue to make sure those stories are told.
So it's almost like a micro business.
Yes.
All those labels really I find fascinating. There's solopreneur, womanpreneur, mompreneur. I've learned recently graypreneur, maturepreneur, and today I saw boomerpreneur for the first time. So there's lots of different types of businesses, and ways that people identify as business owners, and your organization welcomes them all.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so very much
Thank
for
you.
taking time with us. Could you let people know exactly where to find you? It's vermontwomenpreneurs.com.
Yes, so it's vtwomenpreneurs.com, or you can find us on Instagram at vtwomenpreneurs, and you'll find all the events there.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and tune in with us next month for another episode of SHEnanigans.
Thank you.